Chapter 37. Rain slashed across the bleak windows of the Addams estate in Alaska, a jagged rhythm underscoring the cold, storm-darkened skies. Thunder shook the distant mountains, rolling across the barren wasteland of blackened trees and silent earth. Inside the study, the fire burned low but steady, casting long shadows against the ancestral walls. Wednesday sat, black-clad and stone-faced, her fingers laced over one knee. In front of her, gathered in aged velvet chairs and creaking furniture, sat Grandmama, her great-aunts Zelma and Verona in layered mourning veils, and Uncle Pharaoh, swirling something dark and suspicious in a snifter of fog. "What do we know about Goody Addams?" Wednesday asked, her tone calm, but edged with iron. They exchanged a glance, one that said, "We knew this would come." "Everyone talks about Friday like she was the star," Grandmama began. And yes, she had the flair, the name, the legacy. But Goody? Goody was the spine, the blade in the dark. Without her, the family would have vanished in the flames of Crackstone's crusade. After their mother died in the fire, Zelma added, they were left with nothing but each other and the loyalty of the outcasts who survived. And Friday had Tyler Galpin, Pharaoh said with a crooked grin. Her shadow and her sword. Wednesday tilted her head. "Galpin?" she said sharply. "As in, one letter off from Galpin." That brought a grim chorus of laughter. "History claims he was a normie," Verona sneered. "A clever piece of propaganda." "Truth is, Tyler Galpin wasn't like them. He was an outcast. A beast behind an angelic face." "They made him out to be a human ally," Pharaoh said, amused. "Because it framed Crackstone as the true villain. It unified the outcast story. But Tyler, that boy wasn't human." "Focus," Wednesday muttered. "What happened after the deaths of Friday and Tyler?" "The peace talks collapsed," Zelma said darkly. "Normies wept for Crackstone and rallied behind the myth. Nevermore's hopes died with Friday." "But Goody?" "She saw it coming. While Friday and Tyler were building schools and brokering peace," Grandmama said, "Goody founded the Nightshade Society." Wednesday's gaze narrowed. "To do what?" "To watch the world from the shadows," Pharaoh said. "To eliminate threats. Guard forbidden knowledge. Keep the lines of power from falling into the wrong hands." "And she hunted Crackstone," Wednesday pressed. "She did more than that," Verona said. "She found him. He carried a staff, enchanted, ancient. Turned outcast magic to ash. She couldn't kill him," Grandmama continued. "So she buried him alive. Sealed him in stone beneath the crypts of Raven Island." Wednesday blinked. "The coffin inside the tomb on Raven Island?" They nodded. "And Friday?" she asked. "Was she truly as noble and giving as the world believes?" Zelma gave a dry laugh. "Please." The girl crushed skulls with her bare hands. When the townspeople tried to burn her, Tyler showed up in full beast form and reduced them to pulp. So no, Friday was not the saint history pretends she was. "There's an incantation," Wednesday said softly. "To bring Crackstone back. It's in Goody's grimoire. Hidden, encoded in the margins. Between fake blessings and real poison," Pharaoh confirmed. "Whoever took the book," Verona started. "They mean to finish what Crackstone started," Grandmama finished for her. "They want Nevermore reduced to ashes." Wednesday stood slowly, the firelight catching in her eyes like twin embers. Her voice was calm and cold. "Then let them come. I intend to greet them personally." The fire crackled. "I will bring that grimoire home," Wednesday said. The storm outside hadn't let up, but the fire in the Addams study roared even louder, matched only by the tension in the room. "So," Uncle Greg said, pacing with a cigar he never lit, "we used the lawsuit not just to scream bloody murder, but to twist arms." Politely. Morticia nodded slowly. "The threat of a public trial, media attention, liability. Jericho's reputation is built on their little tourist trap and pilgrim pageantry. A scandal could crush them." Adele tapped the edge of her legal binder. "Exactly. The mayor and sheriff won't want that kind of noise. Especially if they understand how high the stakes are." Gomez let out a breath. Then we make them understand. They still think it's just a book, Wednesday muttered, arms crossed. They don't know what's inside. I saw it clear as day, Wednesday said, looking into the fireplace again. If we don't get Goody's grimoire back before the eclipse, there won't be a school left to protect. Then we lean on them, Uncle Fester said, cracking his knuckles. We make them sweat. The mayor, the sheriff, hell, even Pilgrim World's board. We give them one clear choice, find the book, or face a lawsuit that'll bury them. Lucian leaned forward, eyes glinting. Do we tell them about the vision? No, Morticia said firmly. They'll laugh. Dismiss it. We give them deadlines, pressure, and consequence. That's how you move people like that. Adele nodded. We've drafted a formal notice of intent to sue. We serve them tomorrow. If the grimoire isn't recovered by the blood moon, we file. No delays. And if they do recover it? Calpurnia asked. We withdraw, Adele said simply. But make it clear, this is their only out. And meanwhile, Gomez said, turning to Wednesday, you do what you do. I already am, she replied. Whoever took it knew exactly what they were doing. Which means they'll try to use it, Grandmama warned. You better find them before they try anything with that incantation. I will, Wednesday said, eyes steeled. Before the blood moon. You're sure? Lucian asked. Positive. Uncle Fester grinned. Then let's give them hell. Legally speaking, back in Jericho, the scent of burnt coffee and thick summer air lingered in the sheriff's station. Dalton Merrow, precise as ever in a three-piece suit, raised a brow when his inbox pinged. Certified mail. From Washington, he muttered, slicing the envelope open with his pocket blade. Inside was a sleek black folder embossed with the seal of Addams and Bain LLP and the fine penmanship of Adele Addams. ESQ, it was direct, formal, lethal in tone. To the offices of the mayor, Pilgrim World Historical Committee, and the Jericho Sheriff's Department. On behalf of the Addams estate, this letter confirms our decision to temporarily withhold litigation regarding the missing artifact, Goody Addams' original grimoire, stolen from the Friday Addams exhibition under your joint custody. The family, in their discretion, has granted an extension. The final deadline to recover the stolen artifact is the night of the upcoming lunar eclipse. Should the item remain unrecovered by that celestial event, we will proceed with formal charges. The sum being pursued stands at $9.7 million USD. Please also be informed that the Addams family has now received the full shipment of Friday Addams' original manuscripts, all confirmed to be present and accounted for. This is not leniency. This is a ticking clock. Sincerely. Adele Addams, ESQ. Dalton let out a low whistle. Well, at least they got the manuscripts. That buys us some mercy. Later, at City Hall, Sheriff Galpin shoved the letter onto Mayor Walker's desk. They're pushing the lawsuit back until the lunar eclipse. The mayor blinked. What, like, an astrological deadline? Dalton Merrow, standing off to the side and reading from his phone, answered without missing a beat. The eclipse, that's their mark. Lunar calendar, not Gregorian. Galpin raised a brow. So when exactly is that? Dalton held up the date on his screen. October 17th. Mayor Walker rubbed his face with both hands. So we've got until mid-October to find a 400-year-old book that was stolen out from under our noses. Galpin crossed his arms. They say the rest of Friday's stuff made it back to the Addams estate, right? Dalton nodded. Confirmed delivery. Manuscripts intact. Walker exhaled in relief. Well, thank God for small miracles. Galpin added under his breath, means the bill doesn't double. Dalton gave a dry chuckle. You two have no idea how bloody the Addams clan gets when they're fighting over who keeps which cursed family heirloom. I've seen their estate arguments. At one point, two cousins ended up dueling over a haunted inkpot. The mayor blinked. Dueling. Sarcophagus and all, Dalton said grimly. They don't do mediation. They do family warfare. Galpin sighed. Okay. So we've got one priceless artifact missing. A lawsuit delayed. And an eclipse coming. Dalton leaned forward. And $9.7 million on the line. The mayor looked at Galpin. Well? Galpin muttered, guess it's time to act like a sheriff again. Dalton straightened his tie, heading toward the door. Then I suggest you move quickly, gentlemen. The Addamses don't do reminders. They do consequences. He paused in the doorway. And don't assume they'll forget. Their clocks tick by blood moons, not business hours. The trees blurred past the car window in streaks of green and gold, like the forest couldn't decide whether to cling to summer or surrender to fall. The light had that pale, late-season hue, no longer warm, not yet cold. Somewhere in between. Wednesday sat in the back seat, spine straight, legs still. A black box rested on her lap. It thumped once, barely perceptible, and she responded with a single tap of her own, a warning. Thing went quiet. Ever since the portrait arrived, he'd been insufferable. The painting, her and Goody, posed shoulder to shoulder in grayscale defiance, had stirred the house into its usual quiet chaos. It wasn't the brushwork or the history that sparked the fuss. It was the ghostly outline of a hand on her left shoulder. Thing claimed it was him. And didn't shut up about it. He pointed. He gestured. He left sticky notes. He mimed the pose so many times during dinner that Grandmama nearly threw her fork. Morticia indulged it with grace. Gomez with pride. Fester with a suggestion that they add lightning bolts to the frame. Then Thing climbed onto Morticia's shoulder mid-recital of the Friday's Child poem and started shadow puppeting over her face. That was when Wednesday sealed him in the box. He'd been pounding soft protests ever since. Her 400-year-old portrait left in the Addams estate, along with her other manuscripts for everyone to fight over. Let them fight over it. Wednesday brought only what mattered, her cello, her books, her typewriter, and enough black clothing to signal that she hadn't changed. Not really. Her manuscripts had caused even more mayhem. Pages and pages written centuries ago, floor plans of Nevermore, flora and fauna journals, inked records of everything she could remember from their time there. She had written like someone racing against time, just in case they didn't make it back. She hadn't stayed long enough to sketch the Addams estate in its original form. That part remained blurry, unwritten. But what she had recorded, others were now dissecting like it was ancient treasure. Did she draw the gargoyle wings from imagination? These measurements are disturbingly accurate. Why are there gallows in this garden layout? Everyone whispered. No one asked her. She pressed her hand against the box again. A slight tremble. Thing's version of sulking. The car turned off the main road, gravel crunching beneath the tires as the woods thickened around them. Lurch remained silent. He had picked her up early. No goodbyes, no hugs. The Addamses didn't do drawn-out farewells. Just a nod, maybe a wave. A couple of cryptic warnings that sounded like family blessings. As the trees closed in, Wednesday caught her reflection in the glass. She looked exactly the same. Which was funny, considering how much had changed. She adjusted the box on her lap. If you behave, I might let you out when we get there. The box gave a small tap. Maybe gratitude. Maybe spite. Hard to tell. Nevermore was looming closer. The gate was still locked when they pulled up to Nevermore. A haze hung low over the grass, clinging to the iron bars like a breath held too long. Wednesday stepped out of the car, the black box tucked under one arm. Lurch stayed behind the wheel, unmoving. She glanced up at the gate. No lights. No movement. The school stood in silence. Of course, she was early. She set the box on the stone path, crouched down, and undid the latch. Behave, she warned. The lid cracked open, and things sprung out like a convict tasting air. He scuttled over the cold metal bars, reached the latch from the inside, and popped the gate open with a flourish. A tiny bow followed, as if she should applaud. She didn't. The school loomed ahead, its towers veiled in late summer fog. The front doors were locked too. Thing handled those as well, scrambling up and over the handles, picking the mechanism with the ease of someone who had broken into this building more times than he could count. They entered to silence. Her Mary Jane heels echoed like gunfire on the marble floor, double-strapped, polished black, the sound of ritual and return. Empty halls, dim light, not a single soul in sight. Not even Principal Weem's portrait seemed awake yet. Lurch carried her bags up the stairs, Thing riding his shoulder like a feathered pirate's companion. As soon as they entered her dorm, Thing leapt off and got to work, dusting shelves, straightening her pillow, brushing imaginary lint off the cello case. Even Eden's side wasn't spared. He wiped her desk, flicked a dead leaf off her windowsill, and rearranged her bedside books in alphabetical order by title. Whether it was out of habit or subtle sabotage, Wednesday didn't ask. She looked around the room, the familiarity settling over her like a thin cloak. It smelled like old wood, ink, and memory. The stained glass window still bled that odd mix of purple and green light across her floor. Her bed was exactly where she left it. Her chair, slightly off-center. The typewriter gleamed. A moment passed where she thought about ordering Thing to fetch Tyler. She was halfway through the thought when the sound cut through the stillness. Not a howl, not a scream. Something between them, a raw, unmakeable cry. Like a wolf caught mid-transformation, like a banshee choking on its own song. She didn't run. She walked, through the empty halls, out the back courtyard, into the thinning woods behind the school. The trees hadn't finished changing yet. Most still wore their summer greens, but here and there, orange flickered like warning signs. The sound grew louder as she moved deeper. Wet. Animal. Violent. Then she saw him. The hide, not Tyler, not yet, stood over what remained of a mountain lion, muscles twitching under that warped, sinewy skin. Blood spattered across his arms and chest. Claws embedded in fur. Jaw dripping red. He hadn't noticed her yet. But when he did, it was instant. He turned, and the moment his eyes found her, the monster melted. Not literally. Not fully. But the way his shoulders dropped, the way his whole body shifted, bracing, eager, trembling, it was unmistakable. He was practically wagging his tail, if he'd had one. He bounded toward her in uneven steps, stopping just short of barreling into her legs. His teeth bared not a threat, but something stranger. Happiness. Or whatever passed for it in that form. She stared at him. "You're a mess," she said flatly. "Clean up and get dressed." He blinked, then let out a low, excited growl. Wednesday turned and walked back toward the school without another word. Tyler came back about an hour later. His hair was still damp, his shirt freshly changed. He carried 2 paper bags and a pair of takeaway cups like half-hearted tributes. Wednesday was already seated in the octagonal courtyard, one leg crossed over the other on the stone bench near the dead tree. The marble fountain behind her gurgled lazily, the statue of Ophelia looking as tragic as ever, ivy wrapped around her neck like a noose. Thing perched beside her on the edge of the fountain, lazily flicking droplets of water. Lurch stood nearby, still and silent, with a crow balanced on his shoulder like a sentry. Tyler set the food down on the bench and slid beside her. "You weren't kidding." "The place is dead," he said, glancing around. "Did you actually beat staff?" "Obviously," Wednesday said, already biting into her sandwich. He unwrapped his own. "So, what brought you back so early?" She didn't look up. "My manuscript arrived at the estate. And now my relatives are fighting over it like a pack of hyenas over a downed wildebeest." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Sounds about right." "I came back," she added, "to terrify the mayor and the sheriff for letting my grimoire vanish." He stiffened slightly. "Grimoire?" "The one goodie left me," she said evenly. "It went missing from the Wednesday Addams exhibition at Pilgrim World. In Jericho. Over the summer." There was a subtle change in his posture. And she noticed. Wednesday turned her gaze to him slowly, the shadows under her eyes darker than the clouds rolling in overhead. "How long has he been in control?" It wasn't really a question. The shift was immediate, shoulders straighter, voice deeper, a certain coldness settling into his expression. All summer, the Hyde answered. Not Tyler. The Hyde. I behaved, he added, almost smug. No bodies. No missing persons. Clean record. Wednesday narrowed her eyes. Did you see who took it? Sorry, cockroach, he said, half laughing. I was busy brewing in the dark. Summer heat makes everything louder inside. Couldn't focus on the outside much. She took a sip from the coffee he brought. It had gone slightly cold. I was having a decent time, she said flatly, until one of my visions told me the grimoire had been stolen from the exhibit. Her tone sharpened. Your father has a lot to answer for. The Hyde shrugged. That's not news. She tilted her head slightly. Anything unusual you noticed over the summer? He looked away for a beat. Leaves crunched somewhere beyond the courtyard. He remembered it clearly, someone out in the woods. Watching. Moving. Maybe filming. Maybe more. He debated. Say nothing, and keep the fragile leash she still let him wear. So he lied. Nothing worth remembering. Chapter 38. Wednesday stood and brushed invisible lint off her skirt, her movements quiet, precise. The last of her coffee had gone lukewarm. She discarded it in the nearest bin and made her way out of the courtyard, the sound of her heeled Mary Janes tapping sharply against the stone as she approached the waiting car. Lurch was already behind the wheel, the Addams' long, black vintage hearse parked squarely in front of Nevermore's gates like a shadow-given form. The vehicle exhaled a low growl as it rolled down the empty roads of Jericho, heading toward the sheriff's station. The sky above hung gray and brooding, late summer tipping into early fall, the edges of the leaves just beginning to bronze. When they arrived, the hearse stopped with a low hiss in front of the squat brick building. Wednesday stepped out, things staying behind, drumming a rhythm on the window with his fingertips. Lurch waited silently, unbothered by the quiet stirrings of curious onlookers as Wednesday ascended the steps. She was dressed in head-to-toe black, a dress of soft cotton with puffy but tailored sleeves, a high black bow-tied collar framing her neck, and stockings matched with high-heeled Mary Janes that clicked crisply with every step. Her twin braids were neat and glossy, hovering just above her shoulders. The sharp line of her bangs framed her pale, unreadable face like the finishing stroke of a painting, statuesque and unyielding. She had just reached the office door when she heard someone inside mention something about another dead animal carcass, this time near the hiking trail. Her eyes narrowed. The door creaked open. Inside, the moment Sheriff Donovan Galpin saw her, he froze mid-sentence. His assistant trailed off as well. Wednesday stood framed in the doorway like a curse made flesh. You better not be worrying more about those animal carcasses than the artifacts that vanished from your care during the exhibition, Sheriff, she said, her tone flat, clinical, but somehow still slicing. Each syllable landed with the weight of judgment. Donovan blinked, but before he could form a proper response, he asked, perhaps more out of reflex than curiosity, "Why are you back so early?" "School doesn't start for another week." She didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head, eyes like glass cutting through his soul. "Do you have $10 million?" she asked calmly. He frowned. "What?" "That's how much the lawsuit is estimated to cost if I ever decide to pursue it. You're very lucky my family has been distracted fighting over Friday's manuscripts. Unfortunately for you, the only item I'm interested in reclaiming is the one you lost." He stiffened. "My journal," she said coldly. "The only surviving grimoire left by Friday Addams, stolen during the Summer Pilgrim World exhibit under your so-called protection." She stepped closer. "I suggest you keep your head straight, Sheriff, and not get sidetracked by drooling over dead bobcats." Her gaze raked across his uniform. "I doubt your house is worth even a fraction of $10 million. Then, without waiting for a reply, she turned on her heel. Lurch followed behind her without a word, the door creaking shut again with a final thud that echoed louder than anything Donovan might have said. Wednesday was halfway down the hallway when Tyler appeared, leaning against the cool brick just inside the station's side entrance, his arms crossed, a cup of takeout coffee in one hand. 10 million, he said, straight-faced. Last I checked, that grimoire was only worth about 9.7. Wednesday didn't even slow her pace. Potato, she replied. You might as well round it off to 10. Come by tonight, she added, reaching for the heavy double doors. I doubt your father will notice you're gone. She walked out into the fading sunlight with Lurch trailing behind her like a silent monolith. Tyler grinned, but it wasn't entirely Tyler, it was the hide lingering close to the surface. There was a brightness in his eyes, a twitch at the edge of his smile that didn't belong to someone normal. It was the look of someone who had just thought of something mischievous. Sounds echoed from the empty halls of Nevermore, old wood groaning, distant creaks rising from beneath the floorboards, as if the building itself had paused to listen. Wednesday lay still, her head resting on Tyler's bare chest, one hand draped lightly over his ribs. Their legs were tangled beneath a thick black and white blanket. The kind of stillness that followed a storm hung in the air. Looks like he's finally quieted down, Tyler murmured, the low sound vibrating under her cheek. Wednesday didn't respond. Her eyes were open, fixed on the crack in the ceiling above. Tyler's fingers drew idle, slow circles on her bare back, careful not to break the moment. I don't remember any of it, he said eventually. The whole summer's a blank. Just gone. I know the hide was in control the whole time, but I can't recall anything. Not a single image. He paused. Well, except hearing about your stolen grimoire. I remember that. Thought, her family's going to go feral. They did, Wednesday replied flatly. But not as feral as I did. She exhaled through her nose, thoughtful. You don't remember what made him snap? Tyler shook his head, the motion almost imperceptible. It's not the first time. I couldn't remember half of what I did back in the 1620s either. That's because he was always the one driving back then, Wednesday said, lifting her head slightly. I thought the hide might have gone stir-crazy from not being let out for months after we returned, so I invited you to Alaska. I didn't realize your father would be petty enough to confiscate your passport and ticket. I did, Tyler muttered. The second he pulled the under my roof card, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. The room fell into a contemplative silence again. Shadows slanted across the dorm walls, moonlight cutting through the old curtains. Then the crystal ball on Wednesday's desk flickered to life with a high-pitched, eerie trill. Runes pulsed faintly around the base, casting fractured light across the ceiling. Wednesday immediately sat up, sheets slipping from her shoulders as she reached for her shirt. Tyler rolled out of bed beside her, already pulling his sweater back over his head. Wednesday answered the crystal ball with a flick of her fingers, and at once, the sound of pandemonium burst into the dormitory. Screeching, arguing, and the distinct clash of dramatic egos echoed through the orb, voices layered over one another in a cacophony of overlapping demands. I told you the parchment belongs in the family vault. She clearly meant for me to have the journals. Look at the ink, it matches my fountain pen. We can't divide the codex. Look at the marginalia, it bleeds across pages. The noise grew louder until her father's voice cut through the melee. My little apocalypse, Gomez said with practiced calm, though the tension in his voice betrayed him. We only wanted your opinion. Do you want the portrait of Goody and Friday? Wednesday blinked slowly. Her tone was flat, decisive. I have no use for a 400-year-old charcoal portrait on parchment. I only want Goody's grimoire. The rest is sentimental detritus. A pause. Morticia's voice slid in like silk over a blade. Why hasn't Lurch returned yet? I expected him hours ago. Nevermore is still empty, Wednesday replied. The staff hasn't arrived. I'm not early. They're late. Another voice broke through the crystal ball's din, faint and reedy in the background. Has the mayor or the sheriff found the grimoire yet? Wednesday's gaze darkened slightly. No. And may I remind you all, the grimoire is mine. If the rest of you wish to squabble over what's left of Friday's legacy, do so without involving me. Another brief pause. Then the orb erupted again with fresh waves of chaos, voices rising, tempers flaring. It was clear that no resolution had been reached, and likely never would. Morticia, still somehow composed amid the storm, spoke again. As soon as the Nevermore staff arrives, do send Lurch back. I will, Wednesday said, and without ceremony, she severed the call. The crystal ball dimmed to silence. Tyler leaned against the desk, arms crossed. His expression was a mix of amusement and mild disbelief. So, you don't have a phone, he said slowly, but you do have a magical crystal ball that lets you call your parents. Of course, Wednesday said, slipping her jacket over her shoulders. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're impossible. She didn't deny it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. I'll be back tomorrow morning. I'll bring coffee. Maybe even breakfast, if I'm feeling generous. You'd better, Wednesday replied. Or I'll let Thing pick your order. He winced. You really do play dirty. Wednesday only raised an eyebrow as he headed toward the dormitory door. With a brief glance back, he disappeared into the hall. Wednesday and Tyler had made the most of their temporary dominion over Nevermore. With the school still empty, the air echoed with their footsteps, and the silence felt almost sacred, broken only by the occasional clink of coffee mugs in the Pentagon courtyard or the soft shuffle of Lurch moving through the halls, always dutiful, always present. Thing, meanwhile, had developed the bad habit of inserting himself into every activity. Tyler swore he caught the disembodied hand trying to accidentally deal itself a winning hand in a card game the night before. After breakfast, Tyler asked casually, so where's that shiny new trophy you won last semester? Wednesday gave him a look that was half smug, half unbothered. Come. She led him to the main hallway where the Nevermore trophy case loomed, all polished wood and stained glass, as old as the school itself. Inside, nestled among dusty debate plaques and potion crafting awards from decades past, gleamed a brand-new fencing trophy. Engraved beneath the polished silver was a photo of the Nevermore fencing team taken during spring break. Everyone in the team wore the usual white fencing uniforms, except for Wednesday, who stood front and center dressed entirely in black. Tyler smiled faintly. You really do make everything look like a funeral. I prefer to think of it as a statement, Wednesday replied. But Tyler's smile slowly faded as his eyes drifted past the trophy toward a faded black and white photograph tucked near the bottom corner of the case. His expression darkened. Wait, hold on. He stepped closer, squinting at the photograph. A young woman with a piercing stare, pale complexion, and unmistakable resemblance to himself stared back. That's my mom. Wednesday turned to look, her brow arching slightly. Interesting. Without hesitation, she led him down the hall and into the library. They moved like shadows past the towering shelves until Wednesday reached for a dusty collection of Nevermore yearbooks, all stacked in strict chronological order. She selected the one labeled class of 1991 and set it on the table. They found the entry, Tyler Galpin. Her senior portrait looked exactly like the photo in the trophy case, young, determined, and a little distant. There were no elaborate superlatives. Just her name, her clubs, and a few student awards. Nothing more. She really went here, Tyler said quietly. And yet your father never mentioned it, Wednesday added. He must have known. They turned the page and found photos of Morticia and Gomez Addams, also Nevermore graduates from the same class. The contrast in their yearbook entries was striking. Morticia's accolades stretched across the page: fencing champion, Nightshade Society leader, top student in potions and botanical necromancy. Gomez had an award-winning grin and a criminal law trophy. There, Tyler said, pointing at another familiar face. Principal Weems. She was in their year. Wednesday nodded. Which means she may have known your mother, or even taught her later, if Francoise came back to Jericho as an adult. They all came from the same place, Tyler said slowly. But somehow, she ended up here, married to the sheriff. Hiding everything. Wednesday stared longer at her yearbook information. Says here she lives a pretty normal life for an outcast. She should have just straight up said that she wanted to be a normie. Of all the people you could have married, she married someone who hated outcast. She must have never told him she was one. After leaving the library, Wednesday turned a corner and found Miss Thornhill standing near the front hall, looking surprised. Wednesday Addams? Thornhill blinked. Why are you already here? The gates were unlocked, but the faculty isn't back yet. Wednesday, unbothered, replied flatly. Don't worry, my butler has been keeping an eye on me. Lurch stepped forward with impeccable timing, carrying a silver tray with black coffee, scones, and pale muffins. Miss Thornhill gave a tight smile. That explains the welcome spread, I suppose. What brings you to school so early? She asked, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. My family is at war over Wednesday Addams manuscripts, Wednesday said. I'm not interested in 400-year-old parchment portraits. I want Goody's journal. Thornhill raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I've been keeping myself busy threatening the sheriff and mayor with simultaneous lawsuits, Wednesday added coolly, sipping her coffee. Just then, footsteps echoed behind them. Tyler appeared from the direction of the library, holding the yearbook in his hands. Hey, he said, stopping short when he saw Thornhill. She turned and looked at him too long, too carefully. Tyler's fingers stiffened slightly on the yearbook's spine. His expression remained neutral, but something behind his eyes flickered. Inside him, the hide jolted. There. That look. That second of hesitation in Thornhill's face. Recognition. She saw him that day. In the woods. In mid-shift. He hadn't known for sure before, but now the hide was certain. And he hated it. He couldn't let Wednesday find out. She had one rule, no one sees the monster unless it's the last thing they'll ever see. He forced a casual smile as he approached. Hey, I was wondering if I could borrow the yearbook for a bit, he said, holding it up and gesturing toward Wednesday. Miss Thornhill offered a polite nod and turned to Wednesday. Well, try not to give the sheriff or mayor a heart attack, she said. They already have their hands full with your family. With that, she walked off, her footsteps sharp on the stone floor. Tyler didn't relax until she was out of sight. She's been around all summer, he said quickly, keeping his tone helpful. In and out of the Pilgrim World exhibit. The Wednesday Addams stuff. Wednesday tilted her head slightly. You think she saw something? Maybe, Tyler said. If anyone noticed a missing artifact, she'd be high on the list. He didn't meet her eyes. Inside, the hide twisted in silence. He hadn't lied. He just didn't mention what she really saw. Thing gave a slow flick of his fingers from a nearby ledge. Wednesday turned and walked ahead. Then we pay her another visit, she said. But if she's trying to play games with me, I hope she understands what kind of nightmare I keep on a leash. Tyler followed behind her quietly. After Tyler mentioned Miss Thornhill's consistent presence at the Wednesday Addams exhibit all summer, Wednesday narrowed her eyes. Call your father, she said. Tell him to interview her. The hide inside him grumbled, but Tyler obeyed. Within the hour, Miss Marilyn Thornhill arrived at the sheriff's station, invited for a few questions. Inside the sterile gray interrogation room, the sheriff and the mayor sat across from her. Donovan Galpin played good cop, Mayor Walker bad cop. Well, Miss Thornhill, said the mayor, flipping through a file. It seems you attended the Addams family exhibit every day this summer. I like history, she replied politely. Except the final day, Donovan added. And that's strange, because we have a ticket stub under your name for the final day. Thornhill folded her hands neatly on the table. I couldn't make it. Personal reasons. The mayor leaned forward, unimpressed. Can anyone confirm you weren't at Pilgrim World? Or even in town that day? This is starting to feel more like an interrogation than an interview, she said, smiling tightly. And frankly, gentlemen, the book's probably been sold off by now. Behind the two-way glass, Wednesday stood next to Tyler, her arms crossed. "Tell your father," she said quietly, "that my family has contacts in Washington monitoring the black market." No movement. No sign of the book. The hide flinched slightly. She was serious. Tyler texted the message to his father on the spot. Inside the room, Donovan looked up from his phone. "That's interesting. You said it might have been sold, but our people say nothing's popped up." "Not on the black market." "Maybe it was sold on eBay," Thornhill offered with a shrug. The mayor scoffed. "That journal's worth $9.7 million. You expect us to believe a thief would go through all that effort just to auction it off on a website?" She tilted her head. "That sounds like a thief problem. Not mine." Mayor Walker stared her down. "If you were there every day, Miss Thornhill, that means you had access. You knew the value. You knew the security routines." "I just hope you find it," she replied coolly, standing up. "For your sake. Gentlemen, you might want to cast a wider net, assuming the book is still in town." The mayor and sheriff exchanged uneasy glances. Behind the glass, Wednesday's expression remained unreadable. "She's clever," she muttered. "Almost convincing. If she hadn't taken such an obsessive interest in my family's artifacts, I might have believed her." Chapter 39. Wednesday instructed Tyler to tell his father to ask Miss Thornhill for a detailed account of where she was and what she was doing during the final day of the Addams exhibit. Tyler quickly sent the message to his father, who was on the other side of the glass in the police station. Sheriff Donovan and Mayor Walker began their questioning, careful not to make it sound like a harsh interrogation, but rather a subtle investigation. "Miss Thornhill," Donovan began, "you were here every day of the exhibit except the last. You even bought a ticket for that day, yet you didn't show up. Can you tell us why?" Thornhill smiled politely. "I had some personal matters that prevented me from attending. A migraine, mostly. It was quite sudden." Walker nodded thoughtfully. "When exactly did this migraine start?" "Mid-morning, around 10:30, she replied smoothly. "I took some medication and tried to rest." "And did you leave your home at all after that?" Donovan pressed. "A little," Thornhill admitted. "In the afternoon, I went for a short walk in the historical district. Nothing out of the ordinary." "Can anyone confirm this?" Walker asked. Thornhill shook her head. "No one, I'm afraid." The mayor raised an eyebrow. "Do you realize that everything you're telling us is being recorded?" "Of course," Thornhill said, keeping her calm and collected. "I'm here to be honest." Behind the glass, Wednesday and Tyler watched the exchange carefully. When the interview ended and Miss Thornhill walked out of the sheriff's station, calm, composed, and seemingly unshaken, Wednesday turned sharply to Sheriff Galpin and Mayor Walker. "I want you to bring her back in again in a few days and ask her the same questions," she said bluntly. Sheriff Galpin crossed his arms. Mayor Walker raised a brow. "We know how to conduct an investigation, Miss Addams," the sheriff replied coolly. Wednesday gave a slow blink. "I sure hope so for your sake." Walker's expression hardened. "You have something to say?" "Yes," she said, stepping forward. "Why didn't you bring her in the day after the exhibit? That would have been the proper time to question her, when her memories were still fresh. You know that. There are protocols for this sort of thing." Sheriff Galpin narrowed his eyes. "There are protocols. And I followed them." "Oh!" "Did those protocols include pulling every patrol out of Pilgrim World and leaving the Addams exhibit unprotected?" she shot back. That made both men pause. Galpin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Tyler stepped forward and placed his hands gently on Wednesday's shoulders. "Let's calm down. Dad, she just wants her book back." Wednesday didn't take her eyes off the sheriff. "Don't your blood moon deadline. You should be thanking me for pointing out a possible suspect instead of defending your lack of action." "She's not a suspect," Mayor Walker said, a bit too quickly. "Just because she was interested in Friday Addams manuscripts doesn't mean she stole Goody Addams' journal." Wednesday tilted her head. "Every person I've met who took an obsessive interest in my family ended up trying to rob us. Or kill us. Often both. No one had a response to that. Let's go, Tyler. She turned on her heel and walked toward the exit. Tyler followed, shooting an awkward look back at his father before catching up with her outside. Once inside his car, with the engine humming and the weight of unspoken tension between them, Wednesday broke the silence. "Monster," she said softly, her tone suddenly calm. Tyler looked over. She turned her head slowly to meet his eyes. "Do you want to go for a walk?" There was something unmistakable in her stare, curiosity, mischief, and command. The hide stirred within him like a dog hearing its leash being lifted off the wall. Tyler's lips curved into a crooked grin, one that didn't entirely belong to him. He leaned back in his seat and gave her a sideways glance. "I thought you'd never ask." Wednesday sat at her desk in the dormitory, the rhythmic clack-clack of her typewriter echoing faintly against the walls of her otherwise silent room. Moonlight spilled in through the arched windows, casting long shadows across her manuscripts. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys, translating sharp thoughts into sentences laced with wit and menace. She had been on a creative streak lately, fueled by mystery, paranoia, and the thrill of secrets. Downstairs in the kitchen, Lurch moved with unnerving grace, preparing her dinner in absolute silence. The clink of silver against porcelain was so soft it was barely perceptible. Meanwhile, in the greenhouse, Miss Thornhill was restless. The air smelled damp, earthy, but there was something acrid lingering underneath, something sour, like fear fermenting in the roots. She had been avoiding the dorms whenever possible, disturbed by Lurch's uncanny knack for appearing where he shouldn't. She was certain she saw him earlier today, in the East Wing stairwell, then again outside her classroom window. He never said a word, just stared. Always watching. Tonight, she thought she could escape into the comfort of her plants. That was until she heard it, footsteps. Slow, dragging. Not from the door, but from behind the wall of ferns. She froze. "Lurch," she asked hesitantly, her voice almost a whisper. "If this is some twisted form of hospitality, I've had enough." But no one answered. The greenhouse lights flickered, then died. The only light came from the full moon outside, filtered through the stained glass ceiling and casting twisted colors over everything. She backed away, knocking over a watering can, heart thudding in her chest. And then she heard it. Breathing. Heavy. Wet. Animal-like. Something stirred behind the thick veil of vines. Then, from the shadows, he emerged. The hide, towering, hunched, his mottled, leathery skin glistening with moisture. His limbs were too long for his body, fingers ending in hooked claws that scraped gently along the greenhouse floor. Bulging eyes glowed with unnatural intensity, and jagged, bone-like ridges flared around his neck like a natural armor. The creature's mouth hung open slightly, revealing rows of sharp, uneven teeth and a dark tongue twitching in anticipation. Miss Thornhill gasped and stumbled backward. No, you don't scare me," she choked out. "You're not supposed to be here. Not without her permission." The hide's eyes narrowed. He inhaled her scent. And then, with a snarl, charged. She screamed and bolted through the exit, racing down the dark, echoing halls of Nevermore. Her footsteps echoed, frantic, wild. The sound of claws scraping stone followed behind her, closer, closer. As she turned a corner, she stopped. Lurch stood directly in front of her, tray still in hand. She screamed in his face. In panic, she spun around, but the hide was gone. Only silence remained. She clutched the wall, breathless, eyes darting in every direction. "I'm losing my mind," she whispered. "She's doing this." "I know she is." Back in her dorm, Wednesday paused mid-sentence, glancing toward the window as the scream echoed faintly across the courtyard. She smirked. "Therapeutic exposure," she murmured. "Very effective." Then calmly returned to her typing. Miss Thornhill sighed with relief as Principal Weems and the other teachers finally arrived at Nevermore. She had been under a lot of pressure lately, Ever since Wednesday arrived early, the past week or more had been tense and unsettling for her. When they saw Lurch standing silently nearby, carrying a silver tray with blueberry muffins and piping hot coffee, they exchanged curious looks. "What is the Addams family butler doing here?" Principal Weems asked, raising an eyebrow. Miss Thornhill quickly answered, "Wednesday arrived early this morning. Actually, she's been here over a week now." With no other faculty around, Lurch stayed to take care of her. Principal Weems nodded thoughtfully as Wednesday appeared at the top of the stairs, descending in her usual black attire, backpack slung casually over one shoulder. "And what have you been doing all this time, Miss Addams?" Weems asked. Wednesday's eyes glittered with sharp wit. "I've been tormenting the mayor and the sheriff about their failure to protect and find my family's 400-year-old journal." Before Principal Weems could respond, Wednesday added, "Now I'm going to town to remind them of their responsibilities." The teachers exchanged uneasy glances as Wednesday strode confidently out the door. Lurch remained quietly behind, offering the tray of muffins again, steady and watchful amid the undercurrents swirling through Nevermore. Miss Thornhill gripped the edges of the greenhouse work table, her breath shallow. Her hands were shaking, the scent of overturned soil mixing with the lingering sweetness of the night-blooming cereus. The glass panes above groaned faintly in the evening breeze, and the shadows outside the greenhouse stretched and warped. "I just want one peaceful night," she whispered to herself. But peace would not come. Something shifted just beyond the tree-lean, an unnatural movement. And then she saw them, two glowing, animal-like eyes peering in through the glass. Her breath caught. The eyes blinked once, slowly, then vanished. She turned on her heel and fled out of the greenhouse, bolting into the dark corridors of Nevermore. Her shoes pounded against the stone floor, the slap of wet soles echoing off the walls. Behind her, she heard it, the scrape of claws against stone, a furious grunt, and the unmistakable sound of something massive hurtling after her. Glass shattered behind her. A heavy shelf toppled. A door flew off its hinges. The hide was in full form, hulking, grotesque, with a hunched back, twisted limbs, and elongated fingers that sliced through it like paper. Its mouth was pulled into a permanent snarl, breathing hard, desperate to be let off the leash. Miss Thornhill screamed, darting through a narrow hallway toward the faculty wing. Her heart thudded in her ears. A shadow leapt ahead of her. She stopped cold. Lurch, towering, silent, holding a silver tray with a porcelain cup and saucer. Her breath hitched in her throat. She turned around. The hide was gone. She stumbled back, eyes darting in every direction, as if unsure whether to cry or collapse. The commotion had drawn the staff. Footsteps thundered down the staircase as Principal Weems, Coach Vlad, and several others rushed toward her. "What on earth happened?" Weems barked. It was here." The monster, Miss Thornhill choked out, pointing down the corridor. "It broke the windows, trashed the hall, I swear." But when they checked, there were no broken windows, no shattered doors, no claw marks on the floor. Everything looked untouched, pristine. The teachers looked at each other, skeptical. Weems exhaled slowly. "Miss Thornhill, are you sure it wasn't?" "Wednesday." "Right on cue," Wednesday's voice echoed from above. She stood atop the rotunda stairs, arms crossed, glaring down at them. "If you're all done playing detective, would you please keep it down? You're disturbing my writing time." She disappeared back into her room without another word. The staff stood in confused silence. Then Lurch extended the silver tray toward them, deadpan. "Chocolate chip cookies. And warm milk." Coach Vlad blinked. "They're surprisingly good." Meanwhile, back in Wednesday's dorm room, the typewriter clacked steadily as she worked. Tyler stood nearby, pulling on his shirt, hair still damp from sweat. The air smelled of ink and smoke. The hide stirred within him. Angry, restless, "Let me kill her," it growled from inside, like a beast pacing its cage. Wednesday didn't look up. "She doesn't know you're Tyler. Just that something is haunting her. And until we know where she hid the damn grimoire, you'll play with her, not kill her." There was a low hiss of frustration in Tyler's throat, but he obeyed. Then came the sharp, familiar click of her rubber boots approaching, Miss Thornhill's footsteps. The hide tensed. "She's coming," it warned. Wednesday nodded toward her closet. Without a sound, Tyler slipped into the shadows and vanished behind the secret panel. A moment later, Miss Thornhill burst into the room, eyes wild. But Wednesday only looked up slowly from her typewriter. "Knock next time, Miss Thornhill. That's what doors are for." Miss Thornhill's voice trembled with tightly wound nerves, her posture stiff as she stood just outside Wednesday's dorm room. The dim hallway lights of Nevermore cast long shadows across her face, but her eyes burned with accusation just under the surface. "You'd better stop with your shenanigans, Miss Addams," she snapped, clearly trying to keep a grip on her composure. Wednesday looked up from her typewriter, unfazed. The keys stopped clicking. She regarded Miss Thornhill coolly, head tilted slightly. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Her voice was flat, honest in its disinterest. Because, as far as Wednesday was concerned, she didn't. Behind the walls, hidden in the narrow space of her closet's secret passage, the hide listened. His breathing low and feral. He was tense. Miss Thornhill had gotten too close again. She was edging toward truths that couldn't be said aloud, not if she wanted to stay breathing. "I've been hearing things at night," Miss Thornhill said cautiously. "Heavy footsteps, growls, destruction with no proof come morning. And all of it seems to stop right around your dorm." Wednesday slowly closed the cover on her typewriter, meeting her gaze without blinking. "Sounds like you've been having very vivid nightmares. Might I suggest chamomile?" Miss Thornhill opened her mouth, but something flickered in her eyes, doubt, hesitation. She was towing a line, caught between accusation and self-preservation. She wanted to say it. That she knew. That she had seen the monster. That she suspected Wednesday was behind it. But something held her back. After all, how does one accuse a teenage girl of controlling a mythological beast without sounding completely unhinged? "You've always been close to Tyler," she said instead, with an edge. Wednesday's brow twitched. "And you've always had an unusual fascination with my family. Shall we trade suspicions?" Behind the wall, the hide's claws scraped lightly against stone, agitated. He was seconds from bursting through, from dragging Miss Thornhill into the dark because he knew she knew. She had seen him in the woods, halfway through his transformation. The rule was clear. No one was supposed to see. Not unless they died afterwards. And she was still alive. But Wednesday didn't know that. As far as she was concerned, the hide had only followed the rules. He'd only hunted small animals, as per her suggestion. She'd never directly ordered him to do anything not in her mind. He simply listened to her. Obedient like a dog with a dark soul and a soft spot. Wednesday leaned back in her chair. "Is there anything else, Miss Thornhill? Or have you come all this way just to exchange bedtime ghost stories?" Miss Thornhill stared a moment longer, then shook her head, half in disbelief at Wednesday's unreadable demeanor. "No, that'll be all." She turned and walked away, the weight of her paranoia making her footsteps faster as she rounded the corner.